questions. Otherwise, I would ask Steve from Payara as one of the expert group or working group members to voice his view of the world.
It could be a long discussion, couldn't it? My view of the Jakarta world is essentially we will drive innovation by collaborating on APIs, and that will mean everybody working together and then competing the hell out of each other on the runtime. So my job is to beat these guys' runtimes and performance and operational management and scalability and all those things. And that combination of collaboration to get clean APIs for developers and competition on efficiency and product is obviously, I think, the best of both worlds. That's what drove Java EE originally, and I think we can get back to driving that again in the future. And related to that, with the opening up of all the specifications and the licensing, which us as an open source player that isn't a licensee, I'm very happy with all the licenses that are there, that are very, very open. I'd hope to see sort of new up-and-coming people coming to challenge us, really. New implementations. What I hope to see.
Yeah, well, don't forget, there hasn't been a lot of new vendors entering the Java EE marketplace for quite a few years, right? There is at least the possibility that by lowering the barriers to entry, that we will see other entrants.
If you take MicroProfile, for example, there are a lot of MicroProfile implementations, not just from the usual system.
Yeah.
So Mike, you have to leave, I think. So we can now.
But like Tanya's here, Wayne's here. You've got a whole bunch of people from the various committees. Just because I'm not here doesn't mean that there's probably better answers sitting here quietly than mine. So, but thank you very much for coming, and I hope this was helpful.
Thank you for coming. And so, other questions remote? I see that a few people dialed in. Any questions, comments? Nothing yet? Everyone happy? Great. So, Tabang, you are the guy that has to market the hell out of this, what we produce, all the chaos and so on. What's your take on that?
I'm leaving with Mike. I think there's an opportunity for us to continue to collaborate. In fact, what we do as a marketing committee, you may not be aware, but just as in as much as we have a steering committee, spec committee, we also have a marketing committee. And we get together on a weekly basis to discuss essentially the strategies and tactics that will allow us to achieve the goals that we've agreed upon. Namely, first and foremost, in alignment with the working group goals, we want to drive the awareness and adoption of Jakarta EE technologies. We want to engage the developer communities as they may be. We want to position Jakarta EE as the future of cloud-native application development in an enterprise context. So we have some ambitious and lofty goals. Certainly, that's something that we would agree to. But the fact is, we're working collectively together, and there's representation from each of the strategic members on that marketing committee. And so far, so good. I mean, I think one of the challenges that we've experienced is that, and I think as other folks have probably spoken to, I joined late here, but as we've been challenged to provide the necessary updates that so many people are hungry for, right? So we haven't been able to give news because there hasn't been much news. But as of late, you will have seen a number of blogs come out over the last few days that we've been steadily increasing the cadence, the frequency of announcements, and we're looking forward on December 14th to making an announcement with respect to the certification of Glassfish 5.1. So does that answer the question? Okay, sorry. All right, thanks.
Thanks a lot. Didn't know that you also have to run. So, Cesar, you are also on the marketing committee. Do you have anything to add?
Yes, I mean, we do meet on a regular basis, and just wanted to echo what Tabang said. Thank you. That, yeah, so we have a series of tasks that we're executing, one of them being the blog post, for example. And among other topics, I mean, there are short-term items and long-term items. Jakarta 1 was another long-term item. You know, we were thinking about having a Jakarta 1 conference next year, but we've postponed that until 2020. So next year we're looking at probably having virtual conferences for Jakarta 1. That's just one example of the many things that we've been talking and discussing during the calls.
So I know that Jan, he's on the IJAC, which is a community or an association of German Java user groups. So what can Java user groups, be the German ones or the IJAC as the overarching or also international Java user groups do to help here? Jan, do you have an idea?
There are things we actually planning to do for the German-speaking people, organizing a roadshow with giving Eclipse Foundation background to the new process, and then a combined session with some technical aspect from MicroProfile specs or Jakarta EE specs. That was in the planning phase. And on the community day on Monday, we had some sort of test run of that concept. But it would be a usual evening talk on a JAC that was planned. But let us know if we can do something. Of course, it would be nice to have you as the Eclipse Foundation at Javaland, our big conference, especially for the networking aspects. That might be a good idea, I think. And we also already planned a community event because Javaland has an official program and a community program which is driven by the Java user groups themselves. And there's a Jakarta EE session already planned. And if you have ideas or want to contribute on that aspect, you're very welcome. And I have another question regarding the specification process. Mike mentioned there's a way every specification group member has write access to the document. How you plan that? A Google document, or what is it with the doc as code approach? Do you can answer that, Wayne?
Wait a second.
So I have personal opinions. I have personal biases, but I have no strong opinion other than it is an open source project. And a hypothetical, I guess, open source project, and that the open source rules of engagement apply, which means that the playing field must be level, must be able to actually access it. Everyone must be able to actually access the document. Must be able to accept contributions. Anybody must be able to observe the work being done while it's in progress. My personal preference is something like ASCII doc in a Git repository because that's. All right, then we're done here. No, honestly, personally, I find Google Docs are great for initial collaborations when you're doing like really fast-paced collaborative work, but eventually I think it breaks down at a point. And certainly when you're doing something as important as a specification, I think tracking the history, tracking the changes, tracking who's making, very persistently and very easily using well-known and established tools is really important. And I know, frankly, I do everything in ASCII doc with Git, so that would be my recommendation. Don't just use HTML, that's just wrong.
Sebastian, Ed, how is weather in California? Come on, you're live.
It's super sunny. We have. Can you hear me? Like the Wi-Fi is not best. I mean, conference. But getting ready for the day. It's like 10 a.m. and yeah, a lot of Java EE and Jakarta EE knowledge going on here in the session. So that's the good one. And yeah, greetings from San Francisco.
Okay, cool. So what feelings or sentiments did you catch with respect to Jakarta EE at Code One so far?
Actually, a lot going on for both Jakarta EE and MicroProfile. So you definitely can see that this is advancing and that people are, like enthusiastic about it. Or in other words, like if you talk about enterprise Java, then it's here from content-wise mostly either Jakarta EE or MicroProfile or both, which I think is good. And there's also quite a bit going on of that in combination with cloud-native technology, like how to do that with Kubernetes, how to do that with Istio, which I think is a positive development. Yeah.
So would you see that, let's say, Istio is replacing parts of what we have in Java EE, or which could be in Jakarta EE, where people say, well, we don't need that anymore because Istio does it for free?
Right, so maybe for parts of it, but I would rather see it as complementing rather than replacing. Because if you go to like Java EE 8 point of view right now, right, there are not many features that really collide with Istio in terms of resiliency or in terms of traffic management or things like that, right? So I think that's actually a complementary solution to use both and to use plain Java EE even in Istio. Actually, that's what I showcased in one of my sessions, which I think makes a lot of sense to combine these things. And then how I see it personally is that then developments and evolvements that now happen in MicroProfile basically complement and fill the gaps what is still needed. So for example, open tracing, right? If you want to do tracing with microservices and do that within Istio, you still, for example, need to pass the HTTP headers. And examples like that, where you just like fill in the gaps. Same for observability, right? You just make it accessible, whatever happens in the application, and that is done in a standard-like fashion, be it with MicroProfile or then later on, hopefully with Jakarta EE, if it gets incorporated. And then this would just be added to the applications. But from my point of view, like the programming model and the deployment model, it makes a lot of sense to make that in a similar way like we had in a Java EE world, right? Like thin deployment artifacts that run on a runtime that then might be also, support, for example, MicroProfile. So I'm showcasing a lot of open liberty and just deploying Java EE applications, right, that might be enhanced with MicroProfile also.
Okay, cool. So I think Kevin is happy to hear that you're using Open Liberty. Speaking of Kevin, he had a talk earlier about Jakarta EE and MicroProfile, and the recording guy in the room just stopped him when the session started to get interesting. So Kevin, tell us the missing bits.
I'm not sure what you're referring to. I did have a presentation. It was recorded. Did get some good comments back from it. And what I was trying to do was talk about the relationship, current and future, between Jakarta EE and MicroProfile. I wrote a blog about this a couple months ago now. And that's what I ended up doing, is kind of reactivating that blog as a presentation. And that's what I brought forward. Granted, I mean, it was my opinion of what, how these things are going to be working together. But I thought it was very good that you asked Mike the question and to see what his answer was. And it was very consistent. I think everybody is, we've made a lot of progress with MicroProfile. There's no reason to just say, oh, stop work on that and let's move on Jakarta EE. I mean, it wouldn't be right. And so at some point, we will want to move some of these technologies into Jakarta EE, but it's not going to be an overnight thing. So I don't know. Was there something specific when you said that I stopped, or?
It felt like it's a bit of a cliffhanger. So you presented both, so the two projects, and then there was a cliffhanger, like what now? But obviously no one has the answer yet, so it has to be a cliffhanger. I personally think also that at some point in time it makes a lot of sense to sort of merge MicroProfile into Jakarta EE and have that, let's say, as an incubator, where we can keep the speed of innovation as in MicroProfile with the possibility to break things if we find out it doesn't work for our users. So we change an API, or we change semantics or whatnot. And then after a few releases, when we say, okay, now it's stable, it's only minor corrections, then it's promoted to standard, spec, final, whatever it's called, and then going in the, let's say, slower Jakarta, or slower but more stable Jakarta track. Dimitri, you're a bit smiling. Why is that?
Just because I'm happy. Smiling because it's quite nice to be here, so I'm happy when I'm smiling. So I think it was much worse if I was not smiling, right? So sleeping, or like be sad or whatever. So but I'm smiling, it means that I like it, right? And that's good. So I actually agree with everything that was said, right? That MicroProfile is really doing a good job in making APIs, making specifications, which is really needed for microservices development, for cloud development. And this is one of the reasons why we are supporting these APIs in Project Helidon. Right? So we're supporting 1.1 APIs at the moment. We are supporting almost 1.2 APIs. So we're missing only I said I'm happy. JWT auth. This is only one missing, and when we do it, we will declare that we support 1.2. So MicroProfile is really doing a great work, right? So about joining Jakarta, no, at some point it will happen, because Jakarta is the standardization thing, right? And MicroProfile is not a standard, right? As you said, incubator, yeah, it's okay. So, and I remember then when Jakarta EE for J project was starting, and one of the statements there was, we would like to have MicroProfile there, right? So it's going on. So it's what Kevin said, it's going on, so it's going on.
Yeah, I'm coming.
I'm Mike Nicola with Fujitsu, and anyway, the challenge that we see for Jakarta EE is cadence. Okay, that was the downfall of Java. Okay, nobody ever had a problem with Java. They got multi-millions of users, but when Java releases started stretching out, okay, then the language, the customers found other ways to get things done to keep their technologies current. There was 2 years from Java EE 7 to Java EE 8. Okay, we cannot allow that to be the situation for Jakarta. Oracle has addressed the Java SE thing by taking and announcing 6-month release cycles for SE. MicroProfile, I believe, is moving into a 3 times a year release cycle with fixed dates for theirs. 6 months anyway, not dates particularly. And Jakarta EE, it's been a year now. We've got to get that out. But once we get it out, we've got to get it on a cadence, which is multiple times a year, okay, so that we can keep it a lively and current technology.
Yeah, I fully agree, and I believe that if you have a cadence, a relatively quick cadence, it also doesn't matter that much if one of the sub-specifications misses the release, because the next one is to follow quickly. And so you don't have to delay the whole release train for this one sub-specification.
I would like to mention that technical vision document again. I already mentioned that at the beginning of this meeting. Release cadence is a part of that as well. So this is what a technical vision document, this is what PMC sees as their technical direction, which let's say put this way, E4J project will take. And release cadence was one of the bullets there. So faster, better. There is a link to this document, sorry. There is a link to this document somewhere on the Eclipse website. So if you are really interested in what else is there, you can find it on E4J official website, I suppose.
So we have been talking about the working groups and PMC and EE4J and so on. For those who are not that familiar with it, perhaps who listen to the recording later, Wayne, could you give a quick overview what these individual things are and what they mean?
Okay. First off, I guess I should point out that the Eclipse Foundation has been doing a simultaneous release now of like 80 projects. Very long time. So like, I'm in, let's go. And we've just recently switched to doing the simultaneous release we've been doing for a decade, more than a decade now, to doing it 4 times a year. So anyway, keen on that. So some of the terms, PMC, Project Management Committee, is that the level you'd asked? Okay, so PMCs are a project level construct. So we have a notion of a top level project that provides governance and oversight, and they do things like they're part of the intellectual property processing process for the projects under their umbrella. So the top level project organizes a collection of open source projects. And again, provides basically they're the primary first level of governance for that, of governance and management for that project. Pardon me. Within a project, we have committers. Committers are the individuals who have the ability to actually make contributions. A project has a project lead. Project lead's more of less about power, more about responsibility. Project leads are the primary interface between the project and, well, me. I represent, I'm basically the front door, I guess, of the EMO, which is the Eclipse Management Organization. The Eclipse Management Organization is actually comprised of the Eclipse Architecture Council, the Eclipse Planning Council, the staff of the Eclipse Foundation, and the executive director, of course. And I act as the face of that for projects. So everything I've said right now is really all about collaborating, developers collaborating together. So committers work with contributors, managing contributions to projects, that sort of thing. Again, that's all about, developers collaborating. Working groups, actually, I might be inclined to pass to Paul, are more about organizations collaborating. And I think with that, I will try not to stumble through an answer, and I'll send it to the expert.
Where expert means I know a little bit more than you, right? Is that how that goes? So working groups are a construct that we've added to the Eclipse Foundation to essentially allow businesses to define the governance rules for how they interact with each other. So in the same way that projects are fairly well understood, we have an Eclipse development process, and all that Wayne said about the PMC defines how that's done at the software level. But for this to work, the companies that are working together also need to have similar rules for how they engage. Who's permitted to do what, who's expected to do what, and so on. And so at a very simple level, a working group is just an agreement amongst those companies who are participating in how they're going to engage. And so the basic tool that we use for describing that is the working group charter. So projects have a charter, PMC has a charter, the top level project has a charter, and so a working group has a charter. So if you go to the Jakarta EE website, you'll find a link there to the charter, and it defines how each of those companies are going to interact. And so through that charter, we've talked already about the steering committee and the spec committee and the marketing committee and so on. Well, all of those constructs are defined within the charter, and what their obligations are also defined in the charter. And so we also define, the various levels of participation. So we talk about the strategic members, and you've heard a lot about their activity, but there's also 15 or so participant member companies who are involved in this, and they have a role to play within the working group as well, rights, obligations, and so on. We also have committer members. So Eclipse has this very, we think, fairly unique idea that our committers are also part of the overall foundation, right? So in the same way that member companies participate and are part of the overall agreement with each other, committers also have that right. And so all of those constructs are defined within the working group. And so the relationship between the working group, and in this case the Jakarta working group, and those projects is in many ways orthogonal, right? It's not that the working groups tell the projects you have to do this, and it's not like the projects can tell the working groups this is what has to happen. It is, we think, a very pragmatic approach to recognizing that there are business interests and the business of Jakarta needs to get done, right? We need to promote the brand. We need to work on these specifications, define the rules for how that engages, the IP flows. All of those things are in many ways business issues. And so that influences the projects, but it doesn't necessarily control it. And vice versa, right? The things that the projects are doing, they are independent. They have the rights to do certain things. They can act in the best interest of the project, and the committers are those who make the decisions within the project. But there is a reality that the business interests play a role. And so it is not a hard and fast one governs the other. It's just each of them does their things recognizing the other side exists and being responsive to those, and our experience has been that actually works very well. What happens if you can't resolve things? Well, we actually tried to define in the guidelines, in the charter, and ultimately in our bylaws in terms of where the final decisions lie. But Mike, if he were here, would be telling you in his 14 years or so running the foundation, we've never really had to get to, there's a dispute that couldn't be solved. So we find it a very pragmatic approach that actually is pretty successful. So that's probably a longer-winded tutorial, but just the same, it's a question that we come across very often, and it's not an easy thing to explain. But that in a nutshell is what we're all about.
So going back to marketing again, I think Stephanie, she's running the newsletter and some webinars about stuff. So if someone on the screen at home now thinks, oh, that's a good idea, I want to write something or even present something, what could they do?
Email me is the simplest approach, I suppose. So essentially, what I do is, like he said, runs the newsletter currently. In a couple months, it will be our new marketing specialist, Jamika. She is out of Europe, and she's fantastic. As well, I do the virtual Eclipse community meetups, which are webinars hosted at the foundation on YouTube, live streamed. So we want to encourage people to participate, show their demos of what they're working on for Eclipse technologies, as well as new releases, new things about a project that is interesting, and share it with the community. So, oh, yes. Okay, sorry. And I also run all the social media. So if you ever want a blog posted either on our website or on the Jakarta EE website or on social media, or just helping push community outreach, again, definitely send me an email. Stephanie.Swart, SWART, eclipse-foundation.org, and I'll get it done for you.
Thank you. So, more questions, contributions, answers, new projects to start. Okay, here.
One question regarding the relation to MicroProfile. What I noticed is MicroProfile started out as a framework supporting microservices, but I also noticed that a lot of the things which are in there could also apply to standard enterprise applications, and even the vendors are kind of supporting both things. Like you see it at OpenLiberty, you see it at Red Hat with Wi-Fi or Tontale. And now we are doing it back to the normal application servers. And is something like this plan that you see that you integrate more of this framework parts? Like recently it was configuration, for example, for Wildfly as well, which was integrated. And I think a lot of the things like thesis thing would be the REST client, and maybe some other things like traceability could also apply to normal web applications. Is there something planned to get this more together, or is it still that it's like separated, that it's only usable in this microservices approach and not in the normal enterprise world where Jakarta EE is heading?
Yeah, I give it to Kevin, and I'll probably also add a line or two afterwards.
Yeah, because I think it applies to any vendor. If I understand the question correctly, you're seeing some advantages to the MicroProfile components or pieces of the programming model, and how could it apply to an application server in general? And I think that's what we're seeing. And you mentioned Open Liberty or the WebSphere Liberty, and that is an example. It's not that the MicroProfile doesn't mean you have to have a micro application server, so you can build upon it. I was talking with someone this week. Is he? Nope. Because he was asking me, he said, how come you don't have a persistence layer defined for MicroProfile? And it has been brought up. We've talked about it with the community, and it's basically because not one size fits all. So maybe some microservices need relational databases, some need NoSQL. Maybe some just a distributed caching network is sufficient. And so it's not that we are just trying to limit the components of MicroProfile, that's all that you would ever need, but you may need other aspects of an application server to solve the problems that you're looking for. So I know that Wildfly or Thorntail is in the same boat. So.
Yeah, so I mean, we started with the whole MicroProfile effort on what was called Wildfly Swarm, which is now Thorntail, and then we have just seen that things are working nicely, like the configuration API, which is also now a JSR, so that others had the same idea, right? So we said for plain Wildfly, why should we not just take that and have a unified approach so that we can use that all over the place, because it makes sense, and use these additional config sources like reading from a Kubernetes config map and make it available to all these products. Or talking of observability, which is monitoring, tracing, and so on. I mean, monitoring is a bit of a pet peeve of mine, right? But we have done that work in MicroProfile. There is still more work to be done, but it has shown successful. It's working. It's finally a unified way of getting monitoring data out of the server. I mean, yes, there is JMX, but this always had its own specialties. And then there is also, the world has evolved with monitoring systems like Prometheus or InfluxDB that did not exist at a time where JMX was a thing for reading of data, right? So we also said, well, it's it's working nicely in Thorntail. So why don't we just use it in Wildfly where we have the same need, right?
Yes, because as you mentioned, MicroProfile fits better in a cloud environment, but not only in a cloud environment. There are a lot of use cases for all those MicroProfile specs for regular Java EE applications, which are not yet standardized like the config. So it is indeed a good idea to combine those, and a lot of vendors doing it. You have mentioned the most of them, Payara is also one of them, that we are explicitly working to combine those because it helps, I guess, almost all people that you also have those MicroProfile specs available in the standard Java EE server.
Well, I pass the mic to Tommy Tribe. It was not, from what I know, planned that we will migrate this stuff over into Wildfly, but it's rather that it has just shown successful so that we say, okay, let's use it.
Yeah, Bernard, I'd echo that. It's, you know, these technologies are obviously useful in minimal application servers, but also in your sort of full-blown application servers as well. So it's not a surprise and quite encouraging to see these features making their way to the larger application servers as well.
Coming.
I kind of understand the things you are saying. I have just one small, tiny problem with that we are breaking portability of applications. And that's one of the things that Jakarta, even though we didn't release for a very long time, was kind of good at. And by introducing nice MicroProfile specs, which I agree are really needed, we have a problem for customers, because if you use one application server with one metric version, you will not deploy anywhere else. So like the basic idea of Java EE and Jakarta EE is kind of broken with this. So it's just a concern that I see. You know, I understand why it's happening. On the other hand, I think that there is a danger in that.
I mean, MicroProfile started with the premise of being able to make these breaking changes. This is also when I gave my name before on MicroProfile within Jakarta EE to say it's more like an incubator. And I totally value what you say, and having a stable API over years or stable metric output and all these things. It's also a bit problematic because very often you can only get feedback if people really use it in real scenarios, and then they figure out what works, what doesn't work, and give you feedback, and then you improve on it. And it's at the worst case, it may mean that you need to break compatibility. Yeah, I come.
What I was trying to say is I don't have a problem with MicroProfile, and if you build a microservice on MicroProfile, that's absolutely fine. And you have a single microservice that you have, you know, on a single version of an application server. My problem was with porting MicroProfile specifications into Jakarta or Java EE application servers, where you are, you know, like the meld that we talked about here before, that you kind of think, yeah, this is a great idea, but once you import it into your Java EE application, suddenly you are creating that application bound to that version of server, and that's much bigger scope, because microservices with MicroProfile, that's, you know, small part. Enterprise Java application, that's a big thing. You know, breaking portability there is more important.
I mean, I'm not sure if I completely got you. No, you're right, but you are not forced. You are not forced to use the MicroProfile APIs in a Java EE server that also has the MicroProfile stuff. So, Cesar, you wanted to add something?
Question. I mean, portability to me means that I'm running a Java EE app on an IBM product, and I can move it to Red Hat product. That's portable, and they're both certified on the same version of Java EE. But then another thing is backward compatibility, and that's what you were referring to. That MicroProfile doesn't guarantee backward compatibility because innovation is key, is one of the main goals. Whereas Jakarta EE, I'm assuming that just like Java EE, has this mission of being or attempting to be backward compatible, right?
So I have a question. In Jakarta EE or Java EE, we have the TCK that ensures portability. So in MicroProfile, is there also one TCK per specification? Yeah? Okay, good.
Yeah, but then it also evolves. Kevin, what's your take?
I'm not sure we'll take on what. I just heard the question about the TCK. Sorry, I'm drawing a blank. I mean, I know we've kind of talked about it. I guess I don't have anything else to add.
Okay, what else? Someone online? I saw someone called Ed, probably Ed Burns. No? Everyone still sleeping, California? No? Probably at some sessions at Code One. Not having nice beer because it's so early for them. Sorry. Yes, there's a question.
Another question in another domain. Currently, according to my observation, the developers' attention is on cloud platform, and in particular on Kubernetes and Docker. Their attention is there for the moment. And I have observed that it is very difficult to present them and to gain attention on Jakarta EE and even MicroProfile because their focus is in another place. So they have, for instance, they use other frameworks. There are well-established framework for cloud-native applications, and I wonder how to address. I observe a gap between this kind of event. We all know Jakarta EE, MicroProfile, we are more or less involved. But if you participate to local JUG or in cities or meeting in organizations, it's very much difficult because, okay, people, most of them are using Spring or Node.js or whatever. And for me, it's a difficulty when I try to convince people about the interest of this technology. I wonder if this is a specific observation or and I have no solution for that, but I think it's very important to find a way to get the developer attention on Jakarta EE. Sorry, not an easy question.
No, you are absolutely right. This is very hard to get this mind share back. I mean, Java EE was a real thing a few years back, and everyone was doing that, and it went down a little bit, and then with EE5 and JPA and EGB3, it grew a lot again because it got an impulse from the outside, which also was Spring at that time, interestingly enough. And then I think the gap between EE7 and EE8 was so long that people lost a little bit track, and there was all these things, Docker coming along, and then later Kubernetes that was not foreseen, and then there is a little bit of an overall perception problem. I mean, not now, but not too long ago, when I was talking about people with Java, they were like, "Oh, it's slow. I tried it on Java SE 1.1 and it was slow." So it's slow, right? And it is complete crap, of course. We all know that. But I think the best thing is really we all go out to our local JUG or remote JUG, whatever, in the next big city, and just talk about these things. With Jakarta, of course, it's much more problematic because there is not much to show yet, but this will be better once Glassfish will be released or Jakarta EE compatible, right? So there is something to show around, and then the other vendors will all also come with their releases sooner or later, and then you can really show. And then so I did on Monday, on the community day, I did a little bit of a workshop, hands-on with MicroProfile, and we have some very nice things in there. For example, with the REST client, you have a backend service, you take the interface file, put two annotations in the right place, and then you can just call out without any effort, right? This is the power that we need to go out and show to people and say, look, you can get running very quickly, and then with the right runtime, which is also not too fat. I mean, also Spring has to bring a JVM, right? I mean, so that part is equal. And on top of when we start up quickly and have this very quick get going with all these nice things, then I think we can also get mindshare back. But there are other people here have different opinions, and it's also the task of the foundation at the end to market the hell out of it. Okay. Gal, doesn't look like we need to market the hell out of it, so.
So I mean, we will not. Yeah, we can help, but we are not. You are not writing the content, correct? Okay. So we also need the content and.
One thing that would help is the experience of getting started, right, with MicroProfile, and we are on it. We're working on it right now, and Rudy is right here, and I'm sorry, one too many beers. He's put together a wizard-driven user experience to basically you can navigate through a couple of windows and select what MicroProfile API you want, and also select the implementation that you want, and it'll generate a set of artifacts that you can basically in sample code for you to get started. And we're going to be calling that start.microprofile.io. And that's in the works already. The merge happened already, right? So we already merged his code into the project. And the next step is going to be, actually the Eclipse Foundation is going to provide the infrastructure to run that on. And then the next step is to reskin the UI. So it looks like microprofile.io, callers and all that. And it will be made available for developers to go and start using it, right? So that I think you can exploit that in your meetings with your folks, the jugs. And the next thing on the plate is we have code samples. We have we already have a directory with samples, but it's a bit outdated. And plus there are other samples that different people have, MicroProfile samples sitting in different repositories at this point. And that's the next thing we're going to do is we're going to rationalize that and reorganize it and put it in where the samples live now, so that it'll be another resource for developers to get started quickly using MicroProfile.
I think that's very important to have this kind of experience for the developers, because lots of the mindshare, the frameworks you mentioned, also comes from the fact that one single developer can just take the framework on the web and quickly prepare a quick and dirty version to show to their management, and maybe then, okay, oh, that works, so let's continue with that. But I think that maybe the next step is also one of those frameworks I know in France is Jeepster or Jeepster. I don't know how you pronounce that. So a bit of scaffolding and So on the generated application, I don't know how far is your wizard going, but if at some point there is the idea to put just a bit of scaffolding and user experience in the generated code, that's also something that could be interesting in my opinion.
Two options are interesting. The ability to quickly start a project and to showcase something. Also, in France, at least in France, Jeepster is very popular. And I wonder if it would be possible to generate a microprofile backend, for instance, because it's scaffolding, so it may be possible. And Jeepster is adopted by many, many developers because it enables to start a web project very quickly. So this is a suggestion I had also in mind. We didn't discuss before, but I fully agree. So maybe we can get in touch with the Jeepster project and see their feeling about that.
The other interesting aspect, but I'm not yet completely sure if it's an advantage or a burden, is that once people start using Jakarta EE again, they can also reuse their previous knowledge of Java EE, because there are still parts left from that time that they can still use, like JPA for persistence, for example. I mean, you get that for free between quotes because it's just part of Jakarta EE. Anything else? So here on the remote, hello. Any questions? Don't be shy. They're shy. Okay, I mean, if there's nothing more, then I want to thank you all for participating here. I hope there is still some cold beverage left over in the other room. And enjoy the remainder of the conference.
And just to say, everyone, I need to recognize the fabulous emceeing from Heiko and keeping you all engaged. And thank you for the feedback. And of course, please find a way to participate into the Jakarta EE world and spread the news, engage developers, and keep in touch. Okay, thanks, Heiko, and thank you, Jan.